Do you have a better sense than we do of exactly what is going on and what facts they're finding? We seem to be hearing most of it out of Turkey, but does our government really have a better sense of what happened to Mr. Khashoggi?
Well, I'm sure we have more information than has been released to date. Do we have all the information we need? Probably not. There's still a lot more questions that need to be answered. But one thing is clear. The journalist was murdered inside the Saudi embassy in Turkey, that there was members of the security force from the Saudis that were involved in this. It's hard to believe that the royal family didn't know what was going on. But we do need to have all details. And it is clear that we need to make it clear not only to Saudi Arabia, but the international community, that our foreign policy is embedded in our values. And that when these values are violated, international, global human rights issues, there have got to be consequences.
So it's clear that we want to all understand as much of the facts as we possibly can. At the same time, how much of an urgency is there to this? We had one of your colleagues, actually, Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham, go on another network and said, among other things, he wants to sanction the hell out of Saudi Arabia, to use his words.
Well, I think the facts need to come out quickly. It's got to be a transparent process. Clearly, the Saudis know what happened inside that embassy. We gotta understand that. Why they try to cover it up. We know that they tried to clean up the scene. We know that they came out with stories that he left the embassy alive when he did not. We know that there have been different stories coming out of the kingdom. That's not reassuring to us that we're going to get a complete, transparent explanation and investigation done quickly. I think the Washington Post is right in asking for a more independent review, and that we have the total facts. The United States needs to know this. The international community needs to know this. Now, what action should we take? Let's see who's accountable, who's responsible. Then let's hold them accountable. We have a host of sanctions we can use, including economic, including military, including energy, and including individual sanctions under the Magnitsky Act. And some of us have already called for those investigations to begin.
Well, I was going to invoke the Magnitsky Act, actually, because that has, as I recall, a 4-month time period on it, sort of 120 days, something's going to happen. The President of the United States, in the meantime, has come out and said that there really is a presumption that you're guilty until proven innocent, which he would apply to the Crown Prince. How long does that obtain? I mean, can they really slow walk this thing?
Well, the president's wrong about that. There is no presumptions. We want our own U.S. investigation. Before we impose Magnitsky sanctions, we have to have enough information to base who is responsible for the actions. So that's why the 120 days has been triggered by members of Congress. I'm part of that, asking the administration to do that review. So, no, we don't want to take action until we know who's responsible. But for the president to suggest that this is a court of law and criminal matters and to compare it to other issues is just plain wrong. We know this person was killed. We know there's got to be accountability. The president should be much clearer in his language.
Okay, Senator, I want to turn to a different subject, which is China at the moment. There are reports now that Google may be going ahead with its modified search engine that would essentially allow the Chinese government to censor, as it were. And one of the quotes from Mr. Sundar Pichai from Google, he's the CEO there, is, if Google were to operate in China, what would it look like? What queries would we be able to serve? It turns out we'll be able to serve well over 99% of the queries. What do you make of that as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, if we have our companies going over there and allowing the Chinese government to censor our search engines?
I find that troublesome. We recognize the reality is when you're dealing in communist countries or countries where you have dictators as leaders, where you don't have the individual freedom, where they try to control the information that their citizens can get. We understand it's a challenge for a company like Google to operate in that environment. But I think there's got to be standards that they live up to. They can't allow a government to censor their platform because that compromises their platform. So I really do believe that Google has to be more aggressive. Look, the people of China want an information platform that's reliable. The Chinese government's going to have to respond to it. Google should not give legitimacy to the government in censoring the information that's going to their citizens.
So even as Google appears reportedly to be working more closely with the Chinese government on their search engine, they also have pulled out of some contracts with the Department of Defense. And we had actually Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, the last couple of days, criticized them for doing that. Among other things, he said, quote, if big tech companies are going to turn their back on the Department of Defense, this country is in trouble. Is there anything that the Congress, the Senate, the president can do about this?
Well, we certainly have to modernize our tech economy with our laws and the relationship with different agencies. And this is just a major example. We've had this challenge in the past on national security issues, and there has to be accommodations made. Protecting the integrity of the entrepreneurial spirit and the intellectual property and privacy, absolutely we want to have protections in there. But we also have to be realistic as to the needs for our government to be able to use this to protect the welfare of our nation.
And finally, Senator, let's talk about the midterms just a little bit, and particularly the Senate races. There seems to be a sense, at least among some people, including the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, that in fact things have really turned around and that the Republicans have the upper hand in not only holding the Senate, maybe increasing their majority. And if, frankly, they attribute it to the confirmation battle over Justice Kavanaugh. Is that your take?
I think the voters have the upper hand. So, if we see the type of voter participation that we have seen since the last elections when Donald Trump was elected, people want to express themselves. I see this in Maryland. I see it all over the nation. So I think you're going to see a large number of people who normally don't participate in midterms coming out to participate. I think that's going to help Democrats. I think you're going to see a blue wave. I think you'll see a very large blue wave, and it will have consequences in both the House and Senate.